Hey Reddit, my name's Hank, and I never thought I'd have a story like this to tell. It's about my family, or at least the family I thought I had. Up until a few months ago, if anyone had asked me, I'd have said we were picture perfect. I lived in this snug, warm house on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin, with my wife Donna, our 12-year-old daughter Emily, and our hyper little beagle named Duke. It was a life straight out of those TV shows where everyone gets along, the kind of life that has you grinning at the thought of coming home. That was us, or so it seemed. Donna was the kind of woman who lit up a room, always organizing block parties or baking something delicious. With her wild curls and big, questioning eyes, she was as smart as they come, glued to her books and full of hugs for her old man. Duke was the little furball that never failed to make us laugh, always getting into some kind of mischief. We were a team, the four of us against whatever life threw our way, or that's what I was led to believe. I was the guy who'd come home from work every day, throw Emily into the air as she laughed, and then wrap Donna in a hug that said, "I'm so glad to be back here with you. We had it all figured out, and life was good. But here's where it gets messy, folks." One evening, things started to unravel. I was looking for the pizza place's number on Donna's phone because, Friday night is pizza night, a sacred tradition in our house. But I stumbled upon something that was definitely not about pizza. There, popping out like a sore thumb amidst the usual texts about groceries and school pickups, were these messages from a guy named Tom. His texts were littered with heart emojis, winky faces, and some stuff that made my stomach do backflips. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I just stood there, frozen, the phone heavy in my hand. Was I really seeing this? Donna with her laughter that filled our home, the mother of my child sending hearts to some dude named Tom. It couldn't be right. Maybe it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a prank. I didn't want to believe it. Who wants to believe that their sunshine is actually a storm waiting to happen? So I put the phone down, the number for pizza long forgotten. I tried to act normal, but inside I was a mess of questions and doubts. I watched Donna and Emily, wondering if I was just being paranoid, but the images of those messages wouldn't leave my mind. It was like a dark cloud had settled over our little house, and suddenly it didn't feel so cozy anymore. I needed answers, but I was scared to ask the questions. So there I was, playing pretend in my own life, smiling through a dinner where every laugh felt like a lie. And that, dear friends, was the beginning of the end of the happy family that never was. After the pizza night debacle, I spent the weekend wrestling with my thoughts, trying to piece together the puzzle that was suddenly my life. I was like a detective in one of those old noir films, except the case was my own marriage. It felt surreal, By Sunday evening, the weight of those messages was like a lead vest, and I knew I had to clear the air. So I braced myself and confronted Donna. I remember my hands were shaking when I asked her about Tom. She just looked at me, her eyes wide with what I mistook for surprise. Then she laughed, not the warm laugh that usually filled our home, but something sharp and quick. She told me Tom was just a friend from her yoga class, someone who made her laugh. "You're being ridiculous, Hank," she said, shaking her head like I was a little kid who'd said something silly. I wanted to believe her, Reddit, I really did. But there was something off in her smile, something that didn't reach her eyes. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. Donna was my wife, the love of my life, the mother of my child. Friends send each other emojis, right? Nothing to lose sleep over. But then, Emily, who had always been Daddy's biggest fan, started giving me the cold shoulder. She was whispering with her mum, giving me these long, searching looks that made me feel like I was on trial in my own home. Every time I walked into the room, their conversation would stop. Whisper, 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 and then silence when I showed up. What really got to me was how she started locking her phone. Now, all of a sudden, her phone was Fort Knox, and I wasn't allowed in. The air in the house changed. It was like walking into a room where the floor might disappear at any moment. I felt like an outsider, like I'd stumbled into the wrong story and couldn't find the exit. Was I just being paranoid? That word kept spinning in my head, paranoid. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe Donna was right. Maybe I was just being ridiculous. Every laugh, Every whisper, every look, they all became clues. But clues to what? The worst part, Reddit, was the silence. The silence when I asked how their day was and got nothing but mumbles in return. The silence when I tried to hug Donna and she gently pushed me away, saying she was tired or not feeling well. The silence in my head when I tried to convince myself that everything was okay. I started to doubt my own thoughts, my own feelings. I'd look in the mirror, and instead of seeing Hank, the loving husband and father, I saw a stranger, a man who didn't know his own wife and kid anymore. It was like standing on a bridge, watching the water below, and not knowing if you jumped whether you'd swim or sink. Hey again, Reddit. So where were we? Ah yes, in the thick of my own personal soap opera. I wish I could tell you things got better, but life's not in the habit of handing out fairy tale twists. I remember it was a Thursday night when I overheard that conversation, the one that turned the nagging doubts into screaming alarms. I was coming back inside from taking out the trash when I heard their voices floating down from Emily's bedroom window. I should have walked away, but I was drawn to the sound like a moth to a flame. "You should be with who makes you happy, Mom," Emily said, her voice serious and more grown up than I'd ever heard it. Those words felt like a gut punch. This wasn't some random pep talk. This was my daughter giving her blessing to what seemed like the dismantling of our family. I stood there frozen as the cold Wisconsin night air beat at my skin. "Happy," she said. The irony of it twisted in my chest. Here I was, trying to keep us all happy by playing the part of the clueless husband. A few days later, the second domino fell. I was on our home computer when I noticed it running slower than usual. Being the semi-tech savvy dad that I am, I decided to do some digital cleaning. Donna's email was logged in, she must have forgotten to log out. And there it was, a folder marked work stuff. Innocent enough, but the universe has a sixth sense of humor. Curiosity got the best of me, and I clicked. Work stuff? Not unless her job included exchanging love letters and cozy photos with Tom, whose face was now more familiar to me than my own reflection. Each email was a hammer building a coffin for our marriage. "My dearest, I long for the next time we're together. You are my true happiness." I couldn't breathe. There it was, the life I didn't know, laid bare in pixelated confessionals and JPEG secrets. My heart raced, a mix of anger and heartbreak churned in my stomach. Confrontation was inevitable. This time I had proof solid and undeniable. So I faced Donna with her own words, the emails printed out and laid between us like a challenge. But she was a fortress. She denied it all with a fire in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She accused me of invading her privacy, of being a control freak. "Don't you trust me, Hank?" she spat, as if I was the one who had brought strangers into our marriage. She turned my world upside down, making me feel guilty for uncovering the truth. And for a moment, a fleeting, weak moment, I doubted myself. I wondered if I was the villain in her story, the bad guy who snooped and pried and broke the sacred trust between man and wife. But no, Reddit, I wasn't the bad guy. I was just the guy who couldn't see the wool that had been pulled over his eyes, the guy who believed in a happy family portrait, not realizing it was drawn with disappearing ink. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the lies were just beginning to unravel. I told Donna I had a business trip, a last-minute deal that couldn't wait, real important stuff. She kissed me goodbye with that same detached peck that had become the norm, and Emily barely glanced up from her phone to wave me off. As I drove away, I could see Donna's silhouette at the window, phone already in hand. My gut twisted. I didn't head to the airport. Instead, I parked a street over in my buddy's beat-up Camaro. There I was, slouched in the driver's seat, baseball cap pulled low, heart thumping in my chest. It felt like a stakeout in my own life, which is about as messed up as it sounds. Hours ticked by, and doubt started to eat at me. What if I was wrong? What if I was the paranoid, jealous husband, ruining what was left of our marriage? But then, as the night deepened, my worst fears were confirmed. I saw him. Tom. He walked up to my house, bold as brass, and Donna let him in with a smile I hadn't seen in months. My heart shattered, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. There it was, the undeniable truth. The family I thought I had was gone, replaced by a reality I never wanted to face. What if those messages and emails were just a fantasy, a joke? But then, as the afternoon sun began to dip, painting the Wisconsin sky in shades of fire, I saw them. Donna and Emily walked out, dressed up like it was date night, but the date wasn't with me. Moments later, Tom appeared, that too familiar stranger. My breath hitched as they met on the sidewalk, laughing about something I couldn't hear, couldn't be a part of. Their hands found each other, and that's when my heart didn't just break, it shattered. They were headed to Luciano's, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wait list, the kind of place we'd saved for anniversaries and whispered sweet nothings over candlelight. I followed at a distance, the Camaro's engine a low growl beneath the city sounds. From a parking spot across the street, I watched them through the restaurant window. They picked a table, our table near the back with a view of the park. When Tom kissed her hand across the white tablecloth, it was like watching a scene from someone else's life. Only I knew all the lines. I wanted to storm in there, to flip tables and demand answers, but I didn't. I sat there, a silent spectator to my own tragedy, fury boiling over, hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. It was real, all of it. The lies, the sneaking around, the betrayal. It was as tangible as the leather of the steering wheel beneath my grip. Living in a bad dream. No, this was worse. In dreams you wake up. There's relief. But there was no waking up from this, no escape from the sting of betrayal. It seared through me, hot and fierce, leaving me to smoulder in the wreckage of what I once thought was a happy life. Parked in the shadows with a heart full of lead, I realized the depth of the lie I'd been living. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, her choice, and it torched everything. You'd think after the stakeout stunt, I'd have had enough drama to last a lifetime. But there's something about getting sucker punched by life. You either lie down and take it, or you stand up and start swinging. So I went for round 2, with the truth clenched in my fists. I waited until the next day, after the images had seared into my brain, turning every thought into a live wire. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at Donna without seeing her laughing it up with Tom. When I confronted her, it was with a phone full of pictures evidence that was as clear as daylight. This time, there was no room for denial, no corner to twist the truth into something else. I held up my phone, the photos glaring back at us in the quiet of our kitchen. "You and Tom," I said, voice steady as a drumbeat, "at Luciano's, at our table." I watched her, waiting for the mask to slip, for the lies to crumble. Donna's face went through a gallery of emotions, shock, fear, anger, until it settled on something that looked like sorrow. "Hank," she whispered, and there was a tremor in her voice, the first note of realness I'd heard in months. She broke down then, tears spilling over, hands shaking. The affair wasn't DJ Tempter news anymore, but the why was a gut punch. "You changed, Hank. You stopped being fun. You got so serious and dull. Tommy's exciting. He makes me feel alive." It was as if Chev JTMD handed me the blame, gift-wrapped, like I was the one who had pushed her into someone else GTMM's arms. I stood there, dumbfounded, anger boiling into rage. Then Emily, who had been a silent shadow in the hallway, burst in like a summer storm. "Dad, how could you?" she screamed, her little face twisted in anger. "You made Mum unhappy. You're a liar." My own kid, my little girl, looked at me like I was the monster under the bed, the villain in the story. The world fell away. It was just her words, stabbing at me, each one a verdict of guilt. I wanted to reach out to her, to explain, to make her see, but she was past listening. There it was, my family, a house of cards in a windstorm. The confrontation I thought would be the end was just another beginning, a twisted path into a thicket of blame and hurt. I was the husband who'd lost his wife to a fantasy, the father whose daughter had turned against him, the man who thought he could fix things only to find that some breaks can't be mended. So Reddit. I laid it all out. And what did it get me? A broken heart, a daughter who thinks I'm the bad guy, and a home that felt like a war zone. I had stepped into the ring expecting a fight, but I wasn't ready for this kind of battle. The kind where even when you're right, you've DJ Tem or wrong. The kind where the ground falls out from beneath you, and you're just falling, with nothing to grab onto. After the shouting had faded, and the house had settled into a fragile quiet, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight with others, but the ones we fight within ourselves. That night, I lay in the darkness, the scenes of betrayal looping in my head like some twisted highlight reel. By the time dawn broke, painting a pale streak of light across the room, I'd made up my mind. No more Mr. Nice Guy, no more Hank the doormat. It was time for action time to hit back. First things first, money. It always comes down to money, doesn't VDJTM tit Reddit? I logged into our online banking with a grim sort of determination. My fingers didn't even hesitate as I transferred the bulk of our savings into a new account, just my name on it this time. Next were the credit cards. Snip, snip, all of Don of DATM's cards cut off. She wouldn't VJTM be whining and dining with Tom on my dime. Not anymore. But that was just financial foreplay. The main event was Tom, or more specifically, his unsuspecting wife. How do you tell a stranger that their life VJTM's about to implode? Their VJTM's no good way. No Hallmark card for this kind of news. I found her through social media, a smiling picture of her with Tom, #blissful soulmates. The irony was NDDDG lost on me. I called her, heart pounding like a drum solo, and asked if we could meet. She sounded puzzled, but agreed. We picked a neutral place, a coffee shop where the baristas were too busy to eavesdrop. Sitting across from her, I felt like I was holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. I took a deep breath and laid it all out, the emails, the photos, the late-night whispers. She listened, her face going from confusion to horror to a kind of numb resignation. I watched her world crumble, saw the pain in her eyes, and something in me fractured. What was I doing? Was I serving justice or just spreading the pain? But there was no going back. IVDJTMD opened Pandora of JTM's box, and all the dark things flew out wild and uncontrollable. She thanked me with a voice that was barely a whisper and walked away. I don't DJTM to know what happened to her after, but I knew IVDJTM'd set fire to Tom VJTM's life just as surely as Heavy JTMD helped torch mine. I drove home that day feeling like an avenging angel, cold and righteous. But as the adrenaline faded, doubt crept in. IVDJTMD struck back, but at what cost? Donna VJTM's world was shaken, sure, but so was Emily VJTM's. And Tom VJTM's wife, another victim in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Revenge is a strange thing, Reddit. JTM's bitter and sharp, and it spreads like wildfire, burning everything it touches, leaving you wondering if the ashes were worth the warmth. So there I was, the architect of my own vengeance, standing in the ruins of what I destroyed, not sure if I felt like a hero or a villain. But one thing was certain, there was no going back. The die was cast, the cards were on the table, and the game had just begun. The first domino to fall was Tom. Turns out Tom VDJTM's wife was not the kind to cry into her pillow. She was a warrior, a woman of action. She marched right up to his company and dropped the bomb about the affair, complete with the emails and photos I had given her. The company had a strict policy against fraternizing, especially the married people having affairs kind of fraternizing. Tom was out of a job faster than you can say scandal. The news of his job loss spread like a virus through our social circles. People I hadn't VDJTMT spoken to in months were texting me, asking if I knew, if I was okay. I wasn't VJTMT. I was the farthest thing from okay. Donna was livid. The day she found out, she came at me like a hurricane, her words laced with venom. VDJ and you've JTM V destroyed everything, Hank. JKJ, she screamed, her face red, her hands balled into fists at her side. VJ and you've GA Temera, vindictive, spiteful DJKJ. The name she called me would have made a sailor blush, but worse than Don of GTM's fury was Emily VJTM's silence. She wouldn't VJTM'd look at me, wouldn't VJTM'd speak to me. She moved around the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her voice gone. Chev J. TMD'd been my chatty, bubbly girl, and now nothing. I might as well have been transparent. Once, when I tried to talk to her, to explain why I did what I did, She just shook her head and said, VDJ, you broke us, Dad. You broke everything. VDJJ. And then she walked away. That hurt more than any shouting match with Donna, my daughter, my heart looking at me like I was the bad guy, like IVDTMD willfully detonated our family life just for the heck of it. So there I was, Reddit, the man who had pulled the thread that unraveled the tapestry of his own life. I wanted justice, or maybe it was revenge, IVJ term, still not sure. What I got was a lonely house and a ticket to Guiltville. It GATM's strange how you can be surrounded by people and yet feel utterly alone. That was me. I was the man in the eye of the hurricane, watching as the winds tore everything apart. I had started this chain reaction, thinking I would come out vindicated, but what I found was a hollow victory. I was left with the heavy silence of a house that once brimmed with laughter. The silence pressed in on me, filled with the weight of all that had been lost. Donna's words, Emily's eyes, they haunted me. Revenge, it turned out, was a double-edged sword. It cut both ways, and I was bleeding just as much as anyone else. The bitter truth is, in trying to expose their betrayal, I became someone I hardly recognized. The cards were on the table, and the game had changed. Now, all I had were the ashes of a life I once knew, and the stark realization that some battles leave everyone broken. There's no glory in being the agent of chaos in your own story, no matter how justified you think you are. There's just the fallout, and fallout, as I learned, sticks to you long after the bomb has gone off. As the days turned to weeks and the drama refused to quiet down, I did what I thought I'd never do. I filed for divorce. It was a word that tasted like ash in my mouth, a word that once spoken couldn't be taken back. The papers were stark, the black ink on white paper spelling out the end of a once beautiful chapter. When it came to Emily, my shining star, I wanted her with me. I wanted to fight for her, to pull her out of the crossfire and into safety. But when we sat down in those stuffy offices with lawyers who spoke in sterile terms, Emily's voice was quiet but firm. I want to stay with Mum. It cut deeper than any betrayal. Donna had cheated, lied, and broken our vows, but I still saw her as home, so I moved out. I left the house with a bag of clothes and a heart so heavy I could barely carry it. I found a small apartment on the other side of Madison, a place with bare walls and a view of the parking lot. It was a far cry from the home I'd built with laughter and dreams. I'd sit there at night, the silence deafening, and wonder if any of it was worth it. The truth had not set me free. It had put me in a different kind of prison, one with bars made of memories and what-ifs. I missed Emily fiercely. Every single day, I'd reach for my phone to send her a message, to try and bridge the gulf between us, only to remember her words and let it fall back into my pocket. Sometimes I'd drive by the house, slowing down just enough to catch a glimpse of the life I'd left behind. I'd see Emily through the window, and my heart would lurch, but I never stopped, never got out, because she wasn't mine to hold on to anymore. Not really. And so, Reddit, here I am, the guy who blew up his life in search of something like justice. I sit in my apartment filled with second-hand furniture and wonder if it was worth it. The truth, it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways, and nobody wins in the end. The cost of truth was high, too high. It cost me my daughter's laughter, my wife's touch, the joy of being a family. I'm left wondering if ignorance is bliss, or if the edge of knowledge is the price we pay for some deeper, sadder wisdom. I guess the moral of my story is this: the truth will set you free, sure, but it'll tear everything else down in the process. And once everything you love is rubble at your feet, freedom feels a lot like being lost.